Well, joining us this morning is candidate for Magisterial District Judge. It's Heather Roberts. Hi, Heather. How are you?
Look pretty good. How are you?
Good. Good to see you this morning.
Same to you.
Well, we're going to get into why you're running. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about you.
So I was born here in Titusville. I graduated from high school in 2003, and I went on to Penn State and earned a degree in crime law and justice in 2008. I married my husband, Jack, in 2008. We have 3 kids, ages 14, 11, and 9. Sorry, we just had a recent birthday, so I had to think about that one. But yeah, the kids are getting big.
How is it? We're like, 18 and our kids are 14 and older.
Right. I don't know. I don't know how that works. But it happens quick, I'll tell you that. Life moves fast. But yeah, so on a professional level, a little bit about my background professionally. I worked in victim services. So what I did there was I prepared petitions from abuse orders, kind of walked them through that process, through the court process, at the hearings. I also was on call, so a component of that, I actually responded on scene. Police would call, and I would go out and respond. I would also respond to the hospital, where there would be, usually those were sexual assaults. You'd have to sit in on things like rape exams. You kind of have compassion for people. That's some tough times in their lives that I've, helped them through. And then in 2020, I was offered a position as a civil litigation paralegal with my current law firm. And that's currently what I'm doing. Handle civil matters. I mainly do family law, divorce, custody support. I also do personal injury, help assist in those matters, Social Security, disability, landlord-tenant, which is a common thing that goes through the magisterial level, is landlord-tenant complaints. I help, prepare those, get those ready for the case.
Wow.
So.
At what age did you know this is what you wanted to do?
Is this position, running for this position?
No, what you're doing now. Yeah,
this is something that, as a paralegal, yeah, that's something that I think fits me well. I've always had I've always liked, the legal work, things like that, of that nature, and criminal justice as well, which, why I pursued that at Penn State.
How important was it to stay around here, and how important is family to you?
The family's really important. Obviously, the other candidate, he's my cousin. We have a big family, a big support network. And it was important to me to kind of come back, to give back to the community. Like I said, it's nice to have that support system. So, yeah, I think this is where I want to be.
When it came time to decide to run for this position, what kind of went through your mind? What conversations were you having with yourself, maybe with Jack? How did this decision arise?
Well, so it stemmed early on, and I don't really know the rhyme or reason for me wanting to do this. I know, obviously, being a criminal justice major, it was something that I had always thought about. Maybe when Amy Nichols retired, maybe this is something that I would pursue, not knowing where I would be at in my career if it made sense. But when she announced her retirement, I think back in November, late fall last year, I was like, well, here it is. I think I'm in a position to be able to do this, to pursue this. I talked to my husband about it, and he said, go for it. And I talked to my employer, and they were on board with it, and their support has been great. I know that if this doesn't work out, then, they're still supportive of me as well. So that's been a huge factor in, being able to pursue this. So.
What traits do you think you bring to the table with your history of what you do? What are you hoping to bring to this position?
So to this position, typically in a courtroom, you see a lawyer, you see law enforcement. I am neither. I am not an attorney. I am not law enforcement. I feel that what I bring is neutrality. I am a neutral candidate. I feel like I can make fair decisions, based on facts and evidence as presented, without kind of free of any outside influence, because I don't have that camaraderie, with those individuals in the courtroom. So I think neutrality is one thing that I do bring. Adaptability. I've had different career paths in my life and been able to adapt to them. This position is one that Amy has held for nearly 30 years, right? So it's going to come without its, there will be challenges. There will be a learning curve. I think I'll be able to adapt to that, having been able to adapt to different things in my career. So I think just those two aspects.
What's the preparation like to run for a position like this? What sort of background information were you trying to find out? What were you researching to just to know for sure, like, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, so there's a lot that went into this. I had no idea how much work it took, to run a campaign. There's a lot of just the kind of the legal aspect of it with the petitions, the signatures, going around doing all that. And you form a committee, so then you have these finance reports. So you just have there's different things that you have to check all these boxes, right, to ensure that you are properly on the ballot, first of all. And all the things after that, you just getting yourself out there, and having a good support system. I think that's been key, getting your name out there, and meeting people. Honestly, that's what it takes, talking to people, answering questions. I've received a lot of questions through social media, personally, just asking, how do you feel, situational things.
Oh, wow.
That I've responded and answered, so it's a lot of work, and I'm happy to be able to answer those questions. And like I said, we're getting close, so
it's coming fast.
It's coming fast.
So when it comes to the position itself, did you apply that same sort of research into what a district judge handles and what goes on behind the scenes?
Right. So I know the different things that they handle. Like the one thing, so there's kind of two aspects to it. There's the criminal side, the preliminary arraignments, things of the criminal nature, summary offenses. And then on the civil side, there's the landlord-tenant issues, kind of civil matters, truancy, game law. There's different aspects of the criminal and the civil. I'm more geared towards kind of civil. That's what I've been doing, the civil litigation aspect. On the criminal side, though, like I said, I have been out in the field and worked with police officers in that kind of aspect. Been through the court system, been to numerous hearings, so I kind of have a gauge on that as well.
It's got to be fascinating seeing both sides and trying to, as you were saying, handle it from the middle and making your observations known to both sides. Do you enjoy that challenge?
I do. I like challenges. I have high expectations for myself, and I believe that the voters should have high expectations for the person that's going to be in this position.
Has anybody ever asked you, like, how does that affect me? Like having somebody in that position making those decisions, how does that affect me? Well, that district judge is deciding something that, may send somebody back in the community, may take somebody out of the community, right?
Right. It's a very important position in that aspect, right? People want to know how tough are you going to be on criminals? That was a question. And, each case is, you have to take each case separately, right? You don't know until you get to it, what's going to be presented before you. And I believe that I can make a fair ruling, based on what's presented.
And that's probably the same with what you're currently doing, right? You may be going into the House for this situation, but that situation, which you've probably encountered a lot of other times, is going to be different. Like every situation is going to be different.
Right. Every situation is different, and you can't. Maybe sometimes if there's a ruling that you make per se, and you're like, maybe I should have rolled the other way, or you might question yourself, but you can't let that affect your next case, your next decision, right? You have to be able to compartmentalize those things, and I think that's a quality that I do possess. I've been able to, kind of, like through victim services, that's an emotional thing, right? You can't get your emotions tied into that, especially when dealing with children. You have to be able to separate yourself from that to be able to make clear and concise decisions. And I think that I can do that.
You're watching The Morning Drill on Stream TV and on the Armstrong Neighborhood Channel. We have Heather Roberts joining us this morning, candidate for Magisterial District Judge, and the primary election is coming quickly. Yeah, Tuesday. You mentioned just being out on the campaign trail. What have you learned from just being out and talking with people?
I've met a lot of different people. A lot of them have stories, I've also met a lot of people that, that are not registered to vote, and I've encouraged people to register to vote. And, some of them did. People that are registered but don't know what party they are or how they're registered. But just overall, I think it's been interesting. It's been good to get out to know people and just learn about the different communities. Like I was over in Blooming Valley at a council meeting, and their borough the borough is very self-governing. They have 7 members. They have a code enforcement officer. They're like their own government. So that was interesting to see that small community, I think of maybe 400 people, very self-sufficient.
Wow.
I didn't know that going in there. I drive through Blooming Valley all the time, like you probably do.
Yeah.
But, to know that they kind of have their own little local government, that was pretty cool. That was interesting.
And I'm sure there's been a lot of handshaking and a lot of food.
Yeah, a lot of people ask,
campaign trail.
so how many chicken dinners have you been to?
Yeah.
How many? Yeah, but that's part of it. That's part of getting out there and meeting people and talking to people. And I've enjoyed that. I've had a lot of good food. Actually, out in Centerville, they had the Amish supper.
Oh.
That was really good. Yeah. So if you ever have an opportunity, for some Amish cooking, that's good.
Here's something I've been wondering. How big is the territory? You're campaigning where?
Right. So there are 20 municipalities in this.
Wow.
So essentially, eastern Crawford County. I would say if you were to look at a map of Crawford County, draw a line from maybe east of Meadville over, essentially all of that is in that district. So it's a big district.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is the current office in Titusville, is that the only location, or
That is it for this district. Yep. The one that Amy Nichols has. Yep. And then I believe there are 3 others in Crawford County, different districts.
Have you had conversations with Amy or others just to kind of get ideas of what kind of goes into the day-to-day?
Before I decided to run for this, I did have a conversation with Amy. I went in and I talked to her, and I had the opportunity to ask her some questions to see just kind of questions about the job, if this is something that I'd want to pursue. So I did do that. I believe I did that back in November. So, and that was nice, and she was very, very kind and knowledgeable, and, let me know what that job entailed, and very informative for me, and that helped me make my decision.
And again, you said obviously you're thinking about these things and having conversations with your family. Family, as we talked, very important, to you. What having kids, being out in the community, also extremely important, isn't it? Your husband serves on school board.
He does, yeah. He's very active in the community as far as coaching sports. He's been on multiple boards over the years. Recently, I joined the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. So I look forward to the opportunity to work with local businesses to help economic growth in the community.
So it sounds like it's more than just family; it's also community.
It is, yeah. Yep, I think community engagement is very important, for, this position, to see that somebody out there in the community helping. I think that's an important role that a judge should play.
What you mentioned, just, being asked questions and being out there. Are there common questions that you get that are sort of a common denominator, or is it really varied on what people are asking you?
It's really varied. You get the questions of, like I said before, how tough will you be on criminals? That, to just like general personal questions about family and things like that. So it ranges from, from professional to personal. It's been kind of all over the map. One question that I do get, just everybody always asks me, are you glad you did this? Because they know the work that's been involved,
Yeah.
and I say, I am, I have no regret. However this plays out is how it's going to play out. I have no regret. I've done what I can do. It's up to the voters on May 20th to show up, and hopefully they do.
Well, what's fascinating is it's almost like somebody running for a position, and they say, oh, when I get in there, I'm going to do all this stuff. And then they get in there, and then they realize they can't do all that stuff. And you start learning about the, what it takes to do that position. With you, it's got to be interesting because you've had these, and just again, I'm thinking people saying to you, how hard are you going to be on criminals? Well, they don't know like all the details that you're getting.
Right. And that's one of the things where that's typically how I answer it, is it's hard to answer that question without having a case presented before me.
Right.
I don't know the facts and the evidence to make a rule, So a lot of times when people hear decisions that were made, it's after the fact. And who knows how much information is actually being put out there. So that question was always, I kind of play that kind of a neutrally, not knowing what exactly, what the circumstances are.
It's more than just, yes or no. There's a lot more to it.
Right, you're going to
that.
jail. Like, no, that's not that's not how that works, And there's other factors, how many, is this the first time that you're before them? Is this the 10th time? There's other factors that come into play as far as that aspect goes, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you say to those people who maybe they skip primaries going out and voting? What would you say to them? Get them out to vote on Tuesday.
Right. Tuesday is very important. And why it's important is because, so each of us, we are both registered Republicans. We've both cross-filed on the ballot. So the goal would be for both of us would be to win both tickets, right? That way you are the Republican and the Democrat going into November. So it's important to get out there and vote early. Make sure you have information on each of us. Make an informed decision. Don't just base it off of what you hear. Go out, do research yourself on each candidate. That's what I would say. And I hope that they do show up and vote. And I think there will be a pretty good turnout. From what I'm hearing. There's a couple contested races. This one, I know the treasurer is another one. I think that will get people to vote, get out, more people to get out and vote as well. So
now, if folks want to learn more, how can they find you? Do you have information, a Facebook page? Or?
I do. I have a Facebook page, Heather Roberts for Magisterial District Judge, and I do have a website, heatherformdj.com. And my contact information is in there. I do have an email address, which some people are responding to that. Also through Facebook, you can send a private message. People have been responding to that as well. So those are, two avenues to be able to reach me, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I know it's coming up quick, so I'll respond to you, as quickly as I can.
It is coming quick, which means there's all those last minute things to kind of get out and do. Is it a busy couple days before you get into the primary?
It is and it isn't. Obviously with my kids, I have some sporting things.
You still got to be a mom.
I still got to be a mom in all this, right? And that's been one of the hard things too. These 5 months is I've missed things, and they knew that going in. We had the conversation. So, and they've been supportive of that, and they're like, oh, Mom has to go here. Well, it's like, well, it's okay. Yeah. It's okay.
Maybe she'll bring leftovers.
That's right, and sometimes I do. But no, all around, this process, it has been a lot. It's been a lot of work, but you know what? Like I said, I have no regret. I'm glad I pursued this.
Well, it seems like you've been very open. Again, if somebody has any questions and they want to get a hold of you, there's lots of ways of doing that. So, and you're encouraging folks to do that.
I am. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Heather Roberts joining us. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Luke.
Yeah, all the best.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.